This 4-year-old street urchin finds a millionaire's baby abandoned in a sewer, but when she tries to save him, she gets kicked in the back, and something happens. Comment. What you think will happen. Your opinion is very important, and subscribe to my channel to support my work. Your help is very important. The Texan sun was already starting to heat up the cobblestone streets of Galveston when 6-year-old Lily Johnson woke up under the I-45 overpass. Her brown hair was tangled from a restless night spent on a piece of cardboard that served as her bed. She rubbed her small, dark eyes, adjusting the faded blue dress that had been her only outfit for weeks. It was Tuesday, a busy day at the town's central market. Lily knew this because she had learned to observe the patterns of urban life to survive. On Tuesdays, the vendors discarded more soda cans, and she might earn enough money to buy at least a roll at Mrs. Higgins' bakery. She picked up the torn plastic bag she used to collect cans and walked toward downtown. Her bare feet knew every loose stone in the pavement, every pothole that could hurt her. At 6 years old, Lily already possessed the shrewdness of an adult, forged by the need to survive alone since her mother Carol had passed away 2 years prior. The central market bustled with activity. Vendors hawked local produce, women chose fresh catches brought in by fishing boats, and children ran between the stalls chasing each other. Lily watched everything with attentive eyes, searching for the cans that glittered on the ground amidst the debris. She was crouched near Mr. Mancini's candy stand when she heard a sound that made her stop completely. It was a faint cry, almost imperceptible amidst the noise of the market. It wasn't the cry of a small child playing or throwing a tantrum. It was different. It was the cry of someone in danger. Lily raised her head, trying to locate the source of the sound. The cry seemed to be coming from below, from the ground. She followed the noise to a manhole near the market, where the city's sewer system connected to the main streets. The iron cover was slightly displaced, leaving a dark opening. She approached carefully and peered into the hole. It took a few seconds for her eyes to adjust to the darkness, but when she could see clearly, her heart nearly stopped. Down there, about 6 feet deep, was a baby. A very small child, probably only a few months old, wrapped in a dirty pink blanket. The baby was crying with a hoarse voice, as if he had been screaming for a long time. His little arms moved weakly, and Lily could see that he was cold and hungry. "Oh, my God," the girl whispered, feeling tears welling up in her eyes. "How did you get here?" Lily looked around, searching for someone who could help. The market remained busy, but no one seemed to have noticed what she had discovered. People hurried past, focused on their shopping and chores. The girl knew she needed to act quickly. The baby was in danger, and every minute that passed could be fatal. She tried to shout for help, but her voice was lost in the noise of the market. No one paid attention to a dirty, barefoot street girl. Desperate, Lily lay down on the ground and extended her arm into the manhole, trying to reach the baby. Her fingers almost touched the pink blanket, but it was still a few inches away. Baby continued to cry, and she could see that he was getting weaker. "It's okay, baby," Lily murmured, trying to soothe the child. "I'm going to get you out of there. I won't leave you alone." That's when she felt a presence behind her. Before she could turn to see who it was, a violent kick struck her back with brutal force. The pain was so intense that Lily lost her balance instantly, and her small body was thrown into the manhole. The fall seemed to last an eternity. Lily tried to protect herself, but the darkness swallowed her completely. Her body hit the concrete walls of the sewer before finally hitting the damp, slippery bottom. For a few seconds, everything was dark and silent. Then gradually, Lily regained consciousness. Her whole body ached, especially her back where she had been kicked, but she was alive. And more importantly, she had fallen right next to the baby. Immediately, her protective instincts spoke louder than the pain. Lily crawled to the child and carefully picked him up in her arms. The baby had stopped crying with the impact, but he was still breathing. It was a small boy, probably about 3 months old, with fine blonde hair and blue eyes, that stared at her with an expression of helplessness. "It's all right now," Lily whispered, cradling the baby against her chest. "I'm here. I'll take care of you." From above, she could hear the sounds of the market continuing as normal. Whoever had pushed her had disappeared, and no one seemed to have noticed what had happened. Lily was alone in the sewer with a baby she didn't know, with no obvious way to get out of there. The dirty sewer water soaked her clothes, and the smell was almost unbearable. But Lily didn't think about herself. All her attention was focused on the baby in her arms. He had started to cry softly again, and she could feel that he was hungry and scared. She began to sing a lullaby that her mother used to sing to her, a soft melody about birds and flowers that always calmed her down when she was scared. Surprisingly, the baby began to calm down, his little blue eyes fixed on Lily's face. "What's your name?" she asked the baby softly. "And who did this to you? Nobody deserves to be alone in a place like this." The hours passed slowly. Lily tried several times to shout for help, but her voice didn't reach the surface with enough strength. The baby dozed in her arms, waking up from time to time to cry with hunger. Lily tore a piece of her dress to wipe the child's face and try to keep him more comfortable. It was when the sun was already setting that she finally heard voices above them. They were men's voices, speaking in a worried tone. Lily screamed with all the strength she could muster. "Help! Someone's up there! There's a baby down here!" The voices stopped abruptly, and then she heard footsteps running. Faces appeared in the opening of the manhole, and a flashlight illuminated the inside of the sewer. "Good heavens!" exclaimed a male voice. "There's a girl down here with a child." They were fishermen returning from the bay and had heard Lily's cries. Quickly, they improvised a rope and lowered one of the men to rescue the children. Lily was hoisted up first, still holding the baby firmly against her chest, refusing to let him go even for a second. When she finally stepped onto solid ground again, Lily was trembling, but her eyes shone with determination. She had saved a life, and that was all that mattered. She didn't know who that baby was, or how he had ended up in the sewer, but now she was all he had in the world. The fisherman took her to a nearby clinic, where both were examined. The baby was dehydrated and hungry, but had not suffered any serious injuries. Lily had some scrapes and was in shock, but also had no serious injuries. That's when the social worker arrived, a serious-looking woman named Joan Collins. When she saw Lily holding the baby so protectively, her eyes narrowed with suspicion. And at that moment, Lily's life took a turn she never could have imagined. Joan Collins observed the scene with the experienced eyes of someone who had dealt with difficult situations during her 15 years as a social worker in Galveston. At 38, she had developed a keen instinct for detecting problematic cases, and something about that situation didn't make sense to her. "How exactly did you find this baby?" Joan asked, sitting down on a plastic chair next to the cot where Lily was being examined by the nurse. Her voice was firm, but not hostile. Lily held the baby tightly, as if fearing that someone would take him from her arms at any moment. "I heard him crying in the manhole. When I tried to help, someone pushed me in." "Someone pushed you?" Joan frowned. "Did you see who it was?" "I couldn't see. It was too fast." Lily shook her head, her eyes never leaving the baby's face. "But he needs milk. He's very hungry." The nurse, a kind woman named Rose, prepared a bottle and handed it to Lily. "You seem to know how to take care of babies," Rose commented, watching how Lily positioned the child with natural care. "My mom taught me," Lily replied simply, focused on feeding the little one. Joan took notes on her clipboard, but her suspicions only increased. It was very strange that a street girl had found a baby in such peculiar circumstances. In her experience, stories like that usually hid something more complex. "Lily, where do you live?" Joan asked. "Under the overpass," the girl replied without hesitation. "I've lived there since my mom passed." And how long has your mother? It passed 2 years. Lily's voice became lower. She was on Mr. Peterson's boat when the storm came. The boat capsized and she couldn't swim to shore. Joan made more notes. She knew the story. It had been a local tragedy that cost the lives of 3 people, including Carol Johnson. But that didn't explain how Lily had survived alone for so long, or how a baby had ended up in the city's sewer system. Lily, are you sure you've never seen this baby before? Joan insisted, watching the girl's reaction closely. I'm sure, Lily said, looking directly into the social worker's eyes. I just wanted to save him. Nobody deserves to be alone. At that moment, the door to the clinic burst open, and a tall, well-dressed man rushed in. Theodore Manning was 45 years old, with neatly combed greying hair and clothes that clearly indicated wealth. His blue eyes, very similar to the baby's, scanned the room until they fixed on the child in Lily's arms. "Henry!" Theodore cried, running towards them. "My son! My God, it's him!" Lily instinctively squeezed the baby against her chest, startled by the man's sudden reaction. The baby, who had begun to relax during feeding, started to cry again with the noise. "Sir, please calm down," said the nurse Rose, trying to calm the situation. "The baby is fine, but he needs peace and quiet." Theodore stopped a few feet away, his hands trembling as he looked at the son who had disappeared from the porch of his home the previous morning. "Henry was sleeping in his stroller when I went out to answer a phone call. When I came back, he was gone. We searched the whole city." Joan stood up, positioning herself between Theodore and Lily. "Mr. Manning, I understand your emotion, but I need to clarify a few things before handing over the child." "Clarify what?" Theodore asked, his voice full of anxiety and relief. "This is my son. Anyone in the city can confirm that." "The issue isn't the child's identity," Joan said calmly. "It's how he ended up in the sewer system and how this girl found him." Theodore looked at Lily for the first time since entering the clinic. He saw a small, dirty girl with torn clothes, but who held his son with a tenderness that surprised him. "You found my son?" Lily nodded timidly. "He was crying in the manhole. He was scared." "How can I thank you?" Theodore said, his voice choked with emotion. "You saved my son's life." But Joan wasn't convinced. She had worked long enough to know that coincidences like that were rare. A street girl finding exactly the baby who was being searched for in such strange circumstances. Her professional instinct screamed that something was wrong. "Mr. Manning, I'm going to need you to come with me to give a statement," Joan said, "and the girl will also remain under our supervision until we clarify all the details." "Supervision?" Lily asked, alarmed. "But I didn't do anything wrong. I just saved the baby." "No one is saying you did anything wrong," Joan said, but her tone was formal and distant. "It's just standard procedure in cases like this." Theodore moved closer, extending his arms. "Can I hold my son now?" Lily looked at the baby in her arms, then at Theodore. During the last few hours, she had felt responsible for that little life. It had been she who had comforted him in the dark, who had fed him, who had kept him warm. The idea of separating from him caused a physical pain in her chest. "He likes it when I sing," Lily said softly, running her hand through the baby's blonde hair. "When he cried, I sang the song that my mom used to sing to me." "Thank you for taking care of him," Theodore said, extending his arms again. "But now I can take care of my son." Reluctantly, Lily handed Henry to Theodore. The moment the child left her arms, she felt an immense void forming in her chest. The baby, feeling the change, began to cry again. "Shh, Daddy's here," Theodore murmured, trying to calm his son. But Henry continued to cry, his little arms reaching out towards Lily. "He wants to come back to me," Lily said, taking a step forward. "That's normal," Joan said quickly. "Babies get attached to the person who cared for them recently. It will pass." But Henry didn't calm down. His cries became more desperate, and he refused to be comforted by Theodore. Only when Lily began to sing her mother's lullaby softly did the baby gradually stop crying. "Interesting," murmured the nurse Rose, observing the interaction. Joan, however, interpreted the situation differently. For her, that was more evidence that Lily had been with the baby for longer than she claimed. "Mr. Manning, I suggest you take the child to a hospital in Houston for more complete examinations." "Good idea," agreed Theodore, still trying to calm Henry. "I want to make sure he's okay." "What about the girl?" asked the nurse Rose. "She'll come with me to give a statement," Joan said firmly. "There are many questions that need to be answered." Lily felt panic grip her body. "But I didn't do anything, I just saved him." "No one is accusing you of anything," Joan repeated, but her expression remained serious. "It's just to clarify the facts." Theodore looked at Lily, torn between gratitude and the need to protect his son. I really appreciate what you did. Once everything is cleared up, I'd like to reward you properly." "I don't want a reward," Lily said, tears starting to run down her face. "I just wanted to make sure he was okay." At that moment, an elegant woman entered the clinic. Isabella Manning, 40, had perfectly styled blonde hair and wore an expensive dress that contrasted with the simple surroundings of the clinic. Her eyes immediately fixed on Theodore holding Henry. "My baby," Isabella exclaimed, rushing to hug them both. "Thank God you're all right." Henry stopped crying when he heard his mother's voice, but his eyes continued to search for Lily. Isabella noticed the girl's presence and frowned. "Who is she?" Isabella asked, looking at Lily with a mixture of curiosity and distrust. "She's the one who found Henry," Theodore explained. Isabella studied Lily from head to toe, noting her dirty clothes and unkempt appearance. "Where exactly did you find him?" "In the manhole at the Central Market," Lily replied, wiping away her tears. "In the sewer?" Isabella held Henry more tightly. "How did he end up there?" "We don't know yet," said Joan. "That's why I need to take the girl for questioning." Isabella looked at Lily with growing suspicion. In her mind, it didn't make sense that a street girl had found her son by chance. There was something strange about the whole story. "Theodore, I think it's best if we take Henry home immediately," Isabella said. "And as for her, she's coming." "With me," Joan said, taking Lily by the arm. As Lily was led away, Henry began to cry again, his little arms reaching out towards her. It was as if a part of his soul was being torn away, and neither Theodore nor Isabella could understand why their son reacted so intensely to the separation from a stranger. Lily looked back one last time, seeing the baby she had saved being taken away by people she didn't know. At that moment, she made a silent decision. No matter what happened, she would find a way to make sure Henry was safe and happy. The Galveston County Children's Home was a 2-story gray building that had seen better days. The peeling paint and barred windows gave the place an atmosphere more like a prison than a temporary home for children. Lily was taken there the next morning after spending the night at the police station, answering questions she couldn't fully understand. "This will be your bed," said Miss Davis, the director of the orphanage, a stout woman of 55 with grey hair pulled back in a tight bun. Her voice was rough, shaped by decades of dealing with troubled children. "The rules are simple. Up at 6, breakfast at 6:30, activities until lunch, rest in the afternoon. Dinner at 6, lights out at 8. Lily looked around the dormitory, which housed 12 iron beds lined up in rows. Other children watched, her with curiosity mixed with indifference. At 6 years old, she had already learned to quickly assess the environment she found herself in, and that place emanated a sadness that was familiar to her. "I won't be here for long," Lily said softly. To Ms. Davis, Just until they clear up that I didn't do anything wrong." Miss Davis let out a bitter laugh. "That's what they all say when they get here, girl, but reality is different. You have no family, you have nowhere to live. This is your home now." That first night, Lily couldn't sleep. She stared at the stained ceiling, thinking about Henry. Was he eating well? Was he crying? Did he miss her as much as she missed him? The bond that had formed between them during those hours in the sewer was stronger than anything Lily had ever experienced. Meanwhile, at the Manning mansion, located in Galveston's most affluent neighborhood, Henry was spending his first night. At home after his disappearance, the house was large and luxurious, with expensive furniture and refined decor, but the baby wouldn't stop crying. "We've tried everything," Isabella said to Theodore, rocking Henry in her arms for the 10th time that hour. "He's eaten, he's clean, he has no fever. I don't understand what's going on." Theodore watched his son with growing concern. Henry had always been a calm baby who slept well and rarely cried without a reason, but since returning home, he seemed inconsolable. "Maybe we should take him to the pediatrician in Houston tomorrow," Theodore suggested. "Good idea," Isabella agreed, "but I'm starting to think that girl did something to him." "What do you mean?" "Think about it, Theodore. How is it possible that a 6-year-old child found our son by chance? And why did Henry react that way when she was taken away?" Isabella shook her head. "There's something strange about this whole story. At the Galveston Police Department, Detective Miller, an experienced man of 50, was reviewing the case for the 3rd time. The evidence was confusing and contradictory. On the one hand, there was no proof that Lily had kidnapped the baby. On the other hand, the circumstances of the rescue were extremely suspicious. "Joan," he said to the social worker who had returned, "to discuss the case, do you really believe this girl is involved in the disappearance?" Joan hesitated before answering. Her professional experience said one thing, but something in her personal instincts said another. "I'm not sure, Detective, but we can't ignore the coincidences." "What coincidences?" "A street girl finds exactly the baby who was being searched for. The baby demonstrates an abnormal attachment to her. She claims to have been pushed into the sewer, but there are no witnesses." Joan enumerated the points on her fingers. "And there's something about the way she talks about the baby. It's too maternal for a 6-year-old. "Or maybe," said the detective thoughtfully, "she's just a girl with a big heart who risked her life to save another." 3 days passed. At the orphanage, Lily had become an odd presence. She didn't play with the other children, didn't participate in the activities, and spent most of her time sitting at the window, looking in the direction of downtown. Miss Davis began to worry about her behavior. "Lily," said the director, sitting next to her in the cafeteria during lunch, "you need to eat. You're losing weight." "I'm not hungry," Lily replied, stirring her food without interest. "And you need to talk to the other children. Make friends." "I don't want friends. I just want to know how the baby is." Ms. Davis sighed. She had seen many traumatized children over the years, but had never witnessed such an intense obsession. "Lily, you need to understand that that baby is not your responsibility. He has parents, he has a family. But I promised I would take care of him," Lily said, her first tears in 3 days beginning to flow. "When we were in the dark, I promised I wouldn't let anything bad happen to him." It was at that moment that Miss Davis began to understand the depth of what was happening. That wasn't just childish stubbornness. It was the breaking of a genuine emotional bond that had formed in extreme circumstances. Meanwhile, at the Manning house, the situation was rapidly deteriorating. Henry had stopped accepting breast milk from Isabella and refused to eat anything. The pediatrician from Houston had done all the possible tests, but had found no physical problem. "It's something psychological," Dr. Edwards explained to Theodore and Isabella. Babies can develop very strong bonds with caregivers in situations of trauma. Abrupt separation can cause a kind of infant depression. Are you saying our son is depressed because of a street girl? Isabella asked, incredulous. I'm saying he went through a traumatic experience and developed a survival bond with the person who protected him. It's more common than you imagine. Theodore ran his hands over his face, exhausted. He had slept only a few hours in the last 3 days, watching Henry cry incessantly. What can we do? Maybe, said the doctor hesitantly, it would be beneficial to allow the girl to visit the baby a few times. Gradually, the bond would weaken naturally. Absolutely not, Isabella said immediately. I won't allow a stranger to have access to my son. Isabella, Theodore tried, if it's what will help Henry. Theodore, you can't be seriously considering this. We don't know anything about this girl. What if she really is involved in the scene? Kidnapping. That same afternoon, David Nelson watched the Manning house from afar, hidden behind a tree in the park across the street. At 32, he had been a hard-working and dedicated man until his life completely fell apart. His brown hair was disheveled, his beard unshaven, and his dirty clothes showed signs of having spent days on the streets. David had worked for Theodore for 15 years as a deckhand, transporting goods and passengers on the Galveston Bay. He had been an exemplary employee until he was summarily dismissed for alleged irregularities that he swore he hadn't committed. The loss of his job had cost him not only his livelihood, but also his family, which had fallen apart under the weight of financial hardship. Watching the commotion at the Manning house, David felt a bitter satisfaction. His plan had worked partially. He had managed to cause suffering to Theodore, but he hadn't counted on Lily's presence, and now things were getting out of control. That damn girl, he muttered to himself, ruined everything. David had placed Henry in the sewer hoping someone would find him quickly, causing only a temporary scare to the parents. He had never intended to hurt the baby. He only wanted Theodore to feel a fraction of the despair he himself had felt when losing everything. But now there was a witness, a girl who could identify him if she managed to remember who had pushed her into the manhole. David knew he needed to do something before her memories became clearer. That night, at the orphanage, Lily woke up from a nightmare. She had dreamed that Henry was crying somewhere dark, calling for her, but she couldn't find him. She sat up in bed, her heart pounding, and made a decision. She got up quietly and walked to the dormitory window. It was a low window, and the bars were old and rusted. With the strength of determination, she began to work on one of the bars that seemed looser. "What are you doing?" whispered a voice behind her. Lily turned around and saw Peter, an 8-year-old boy who slept in the bed next to hers. He watched her with curiosity. "I need to know how the baby is," Lily said simply. "Are you going to run away?" "Just for tonight. I'll be back before dawn." Peter thought for a moment. "Ms. Davis will be very angry if she finds out." "She won't find out if you don't tell." After a few minutes of silent work, Lily managed to loosen the bar enough to create an opening through which she could pass. It was a drop of only 6 feet. "To the orphanage garden. Be careful," whispered Peter, watching her prepare to jump. Lily looked at him one last time. "If anyone asks, say I'm sick and sleeping." And with that, she jumped out of the window, beginning a nocturnal journey that would change everything once again. The streets of Galveston were deserted at 2 in the morning when Lily began her walk to the affluent neighborhood where the Manning family lived. Her bare feet knew every stone in the road, every pothole she should avoid in the dark. The full moon faintly illuminated the streets, creating shadows that moved with the night breeze from Galveston Bay. Lily had memorized the family's address during the conversations at the clinic. Palm Street number 47, one of the most beautiful houses in the city. During her life on the streets, she had passed through that neighborhood several times, admiring the large houses with manicured gardens, but had never had reason to approach any of them. Now it was different. Henry was there, and she needed to know if he was okay. The walk took almost an hour. When she finally arrived at Palm Street, Lily was impressed by the size of the Manning house. It was a 2-story building, painted light yellow, with a front garden full of tropical plants and a large porch. All the windows were lit, which was strange for that time of morning. Lily hid behind a large tree on the sidewalk across the street and watched the house. She could hear, even from a distance, the faint cry of a baby. It was Henry. She would recognize that cry anywhere. "He's crying," she whispered to herself, feeling her heart ache. "He's still sad." It was then that she saw movement on the porch. Theodore came out of the house wearing a bathrobe and slippers, pacing back and forth with Henry in his arms. Even from afar, Lily could see the exhaustion on the man's face. Henry continued to cry, and Theodore seemed to no longer know what to do. Isabella appeared in the doorway of the porch, also wearing a bathrobe. Lily couldn't hear what they were talking about, but she could see from the gestures that it was a tense argument. Isabella seemed frustrated, gesturing towards the baby, while Theodore shook his head negatively. Without thinking about the consequences, Lily came out from behind the tree and approached the gate of the house. When she was a few feet from the entrance, she began to softly sing the same lullaby she had sung to Henry in the sewer. The effect was immediate. The baby's crying gradually subsided until it stopped completely. Theodore and Isabella turned in the direction of the sound, searching for the origin of the voice that had calmed their son, as nothing else had managed to do. "Who's there?" Theodore shouted, walking to the gate with Henry still in his arms. Lily hesitated for a moment, then stepped out of the shadow where she was hidden. "It's me," she said timidly. "Lily." "Good Lord!" Theodore exclaimed, seeing the small girl standing outside the gate. "What are you doing here? How did you get out of the children's home?" "I heard him crying," Lily said, pointing to Henry. "Even from far away I knew he was sad." Isabella approached, her expression mixing surprise and irritation. "Theodore, this girl escaped from the institution where she was being held. We need to call the authorities." "Wait," Theodore said, watching how Henry reacted to Lily's presence. The baby had completely stopped crying and was reaching his little arms out to her through the bars of the gate. "Look at how he's reacting." "This isn't normal," Isabella protested. "A 3-month-old baby shouldn't have this kind of bond with a stranger." "But I'm not a stranger to him," Lily said softly. "I took care of him when he was scared. I promised I'd protect him." Theodore looked at the son in his arms. Henry was calm for the first time in days, his blue eyes fixed on Lily with an expression of recognition that was impossible to deny. "Isabella," Theodore said hesitantly, "maybe we should listen to what the doctor said. If she can help Henry, you—" "Can't be serious," Isabella replied. "This girl could be dangerous. We don't know anything about her." "I know I saved his life," Lily said with more firmness than she usually showed, "and I know he needs me right now." At that moment, hidden in the shadow of a house across the street, David Nelson watched the scene with growing agitation. He had spent the last 3 days watching both the orphanage and the Manning house, trying to find an opportunity to solve his problem with Lily. Seeing her there, talking to Theodore, made his blood run cold. What if she managed to remember who had pushed her? What if she described his features to the police? David knew he couldn't allow that to happen. "That girl is going to ruin everything," he muttered, clenching his fists. "I need to do something." Back at the gate, Theodore had made a decision that surprised even himself. "Lily, would you like to come in and stay with Henry for a few minutes?" "Theodore," Isabella protested. Have you lost your mind? Look at our son, Theodore said firmly. He hasn't stopped crying for 3 days. Now he's calm. If she can help him. Lily didn't wait for him to finish the sentence. Can I really? Theodore opened the gate, and Lily entered the garden of the house. As she approached him and Henry, the baby immediately stretched his arms out to her. "My little one," Lily said softly, taking Henry in her arms. "I knew you were sad. I was too." Henry snuggled against Lily as if finding a safe haven again. To everyone's surprise, including Isabella's, he began to make small sounds of contentment. "How is it possible?" Isabella murmured, watching the interaction between the girl and her son. "Babies know when someone truly loves them," Lily said simply, rocking Henry in her arms. "He knows I protected him." Theodore felt moved to see his son finally at peace. "Lily, how did you manage to get out of the children's home?" "Through the window," she answered honestly. "I needed to know if he was okay. You risked everything to come here. I promised I'd take care of him. A promise is a promise." Isabella watched everything with conflicting feelings. On the one hand, she was grateful to see Henry finally calm. On the other, she couldn't accept that her son had developed such a strong bond with a child they had only known for a few days. "Theodore, she can't stay here," Isabella said. "The authorities will blame us if they find out she escaped and is in our house." "I know," Theodore said, running his hands through his hair. "But look at them. How are we going to separate our son from her again?" It was at that moment that they heard the sound of footsteps approaching down the street. A flashlight illuminated the garden of the house, and the authoritative voice of Detective Miller echoed in the night. "Mr. Manning, we received a report that Lily Johnson was seen in this area." Theodore turned to see the detective approaching the gate, accompanied by 2 police officers and Joan Collins. His expression was serious, and Lily automatically cowered, squeezing Henry against her chest. "Detective," Theodore said, trying to remain calm, "the situation is more complicated than it seems. The girl escaped from a county institution and is under investigation," the detective said. "There's nothing complicated about it." "But look at my son," Theodore insisted. "He hasn't stopped crying for 3 days. Since she arrived, he's calm." Joan observed the scene with professional interest. It was undeniable that there was something special about the connection between Lily and Henry, but that didn't change the fact that protocols needed to be followed. "Lily," Joan said firmly, "you need to come back with us now." "No," Lily said, her voice trembling but determined. "He needs me." "He has parents," Joan replied. "Real parents who can take care of him." "But they can't make him stop crying," Lily argued. "I can." Henry, feeling the tension in the air, began to get restless in Lily's arms. She immediately began to sing softly, and he calmed down again. "It's impressive," murmured one of the police officers, observing the interaction. The detective, however, remained inflexible. "Lily, you're 6 years old." "6," she corrected. 6 years old, and you can't make decisions about where to stay or who to stay with. You need to go back to the children's home." "What if I don't want to?" "It's not a choice," said Joan, extending her arms. "Now hand over the baby and come with us." Lily looked at Henry, then at Theodore, then at the police officers. She knew there was no way to escape, but the idea of separating from Henry again was unbearable. "Can I visit him?" she asked hopefully. "That," said the detective, looking at Theodore and Isabella, "depends on the parents." Isabella opened her mouth to speak, but Theodore interrupted her. "Yes," he said, "you can visit him." "Theodore," Isabella protested. "Isabella, our son needs her," Theodore said firmly. "We can't deny that." Reluctantly, Lily handed Henry back to Theodore. The baby immediately began to cry again, reaching his arms out towards her. "I'll be back," Lily promised, tears running down her face. "I promise I'll be back." As she was led away by the police officers, Lily didn't notice the figure moving in. The shadows across the street. David Nelson had heard the entire conversation and now knew exactly where to find her when he wanted to. The punishment for her escape was severe. Lily spent 3 days locked in a small room at the children's home, receiving only water and 1 meal a day. Ms. Davis had made it clear that zero tolerance would be applied to future attempts to escape. "You need to understand, Lily," said the director on the 3rd day, sitting in a chair facing the bed where the girl was sitting, "that your actions have consequences. You can't just go around doing what you want." "I just wanted to see if he was okay," Lily murmured, her eyes fixed on the cement floor of the punishment room. "And now, because of your stubbornness, you almost lost the chance to visit him officially." Lily raised her head quickly. "What do you mean?" "Mr. Manning called yesterday. He and his wife have decided to allow supervised visits once a week for 2 hours." Ms. Davis made a dramatic pause. "But only if you behave." Lily's heart leapt in her chest. "Really, I can see Henry? If you're an obedient girl and don't cause any more trouble." That same afternoon, Joan Collins arrived at the orphanage to pick up Lily for her first official visit. The social worker had spent the last few days investigating the case more deeply, and some discoveries had left her intrigued. "Lily," Joan said as they walked through the streets of Galveston, "I need to ask you some questions about your mother." "About Mom?" Lily looked at Joan with curiosity. "What do you want to know?" "Where did she work before the accident?" "In people's homes. She cleaned houses and took care of babies sometimes." Lily thought for a moment. "Why are you asking?" Joan had discovered that Carol Johnson had worked sporadically for several wealthy families in Galveston, including briefly for the Mannings. It was a tenuous connection, but it existed. "Just professional curiosity," Joan said, deciding not to share her suspicions yet. When they arrived at the Manning house, Theodore was waiting for them on the porch. He seemed more rested than the last time Lily had seen him, but there were still deep circles under his eyes. "How's Henry?" Lily asked before even greeting him. "Better," Theodore admitted. "After you left the other night, he cried for a few hours, but then managed to sleep. It was the first full night's sleep in 4 days. Can I see him?" "Of course." Isabella's with him in the living room. As they entered the house, Lily was impressed by the wealth of the environment. Expensive wooden furniture, Persian rugs, paintings on the walls. It was a world completely different from anything she knew. Isabella was sitting on the couch, holding Henry, who was sleeping peacefully. When she saw Lily, her expression hardened. Slightly, but she said nothing. "He's sleeping," Isabella whispered. "Can I sit here?" Lily asked, pointing to an armchair nearby. Isabella nodded reluctantly. Lily sat down and watched Henry sleep, a soft smile lighting up her face. To her, there was no more beautiful sight in the world. "He's grown," Lily commented softly. "It's normal for a 3-month-old baby," Isabella responded dryly. "When I was in the sewer with him, I thought we might not get out of there," Lily said, her voice full of emotion. "I was so scared that something bad would happen to him." For the first time, Isabella looked at Lily with something beyond suspicion. "You really risked your life to save him." "Of course I did. He's just a baby." At that moment, Henry woke up, and his eyes immediately searched for Lily. When he found her, his face lit up with something that could only be described as joy. "Hi, little one," Lily said gently. "How are you?" Henry began to make happy sounds, moving his arms and legs with excitement. It was obvious to everyone in the room that he recognized Lily and was happy to see her. "Can I hold him?" Lily asked Isabella. Isabella hesitated, then handed over the baby reluctantly. The moment Henry went into Lily's arms, he calmed down completely, as if he was finally where he belonged. "It's extraordinary," murmured Joan, observing the interaction. "I've never seen such a strong bond between a child and a baby." During the next 2 hours, Lily played with Henry, sang to him, and simply enjoyed being near him again. Theodore and Isabella watched, divided between gratitude and concern. "Lily," said Theodore when it was time for her to leave, "would you like to come back next week?" "More than anything in the world," she replied, handing Henry back to Isabella reluctantly. As Joan and Lily walked back to the orphanage, neither of them noticed the man who was following them at a safe distance. David Nelson had spent the week observing the movements of everyone involved, and now he had a plan. "Lily," Joan said during the walk, "can I ask you something?" "Sure. What do you remember about the moment you were pushed into the manhole?" Lily stopped walking and thought carefully. "I remember I was trying to reach the baby when someone kicked me in the back." "Did you see who it was?" "No. It happened too fast." Lily frowned, concentrating. "But I remember a smell." "What kind of smell?" "Smell of motor oil, like the boats at the harbor." Joan made a mental note. It was the first concrete clue they had about who might have placed Henry in the sewer. That night at the orphanage, Lily was happier than she had been in days. Peter, the boy who had helped her escape, approached her during dinner. "How was the visit?" he asked. "It was perfect," Lily replied, smiling. "He's okay. He's growing and he's healthy." "Are you going to visit him again?" "Every week, if I behave." Peter smiled at her. "Then, you're going to behave?" "I will," Lily promised. "I'm not going to do anything that keeps me from seeing Henry." But on the dark street outside the orphanage, David Nelson was making plans that would make it impossible for Lily to keep that promise. He had spent the week developing a strategy to get rid of what he saw as his biggest problem. Lily was the only person who could identify him, and as long as she was free to talk to the authorities, he would never be safe. David had lost everything because of Theodore Manning, his job, his family, his dignity. Now, a 6-year-old girl threatened to take away from him the only thing he had left, his freedom. "I can't let that happen," he muttered to himself, watching the lit windows of the orphanage. "That girl will pay for ruining my plans." 3 days later, during Lily's second visit to the Mannings, something strange happened. She was playing with Henry in the garden of the house, under Joan's supervision, when she noticed a man standing across the street watching them. "Joan," Lily said softly, "there's a man over there who keeps looking at us." Joan looked up and saw a male figure in the shadow of a tree. When he realized he had been noticed, the man walked away quickly. "Strange," murmured Joan. "Have you seen that man before?" Lily thought for a moment. There was something familiar about that silhouette, but she couldn't identify what. "I don't know," she said. "Maybe." That night, David made a desperate decision. If he couldn't get to Lily directly, he would find another way to silence her, and he knew exactly how to do it. At 2 in the morning, he approached the orphanage with a can of gasoline in his hands. His plan was simple: start a small fire that would force the evacuation of the building. In the confusion that would follow, he would have the opportunity he needed to confront Lily away from the eyes of the authorities. But David didn't know that someone was watching him from the window. Peter had woken up to get a drink of water. When he saw a strange figure approaching the building, immediately he woke up Lily. "There's someone outside," he whispered. "And he has something in his hands." Lily looked out the window and felt her blood run cold. Even in the darkness, there was something familiar in the way the man moved. And then, as he passed under a lamp-post, she saw him clearly. It was the same man she had seen watching the Manning house. And now he was there, in the middle of the night, approaching the place where she slept. The smell of smoke was the first sign that something was wrong. Lily woke up with a burning nose and the sound of screams echoing through the hallways of the children's home. The orange light of the flames danced on the dormitory walls, and panic seized the children. "Fire! Everyone get out!" Miss Davis shouted, running through the halls and waking the children who were still asleep. "Get out through the emergency exit." Lily got up quickly, But instead of following the other children, she ran to the window. Outside, she could see David Nelson watching the chaos he had created, a dark expression of satisfaction on his face. When their eyes met through the glass, he smiled in a way that made her blood run cold. "Peter!" Lily shouted to her friend. "It's him! It's the man who pushed me in the manhole!" "How do you know?" Peter asked, holding her hand as they ran toward the emergency exit. "I remembered the smell of motor oil. And the eyes. They were the same eyes I saw for a second before I fell." The fire had started in the storage room on the ground floor, but it was spreading rapidly through the old structure of the building. The Galveston firefighters arrived in 15 minutes, but the damage had already been done. The entire east wing of the orphanage was on fire. "Are all the children safe?" the fire chief asked Miss Davis, who was counting heads for the third time. "Yes, thank God," she replied, trembling. "But we lost almost everything. Clothes, toys, documents." Lily watched everything from the sidewalk across the street, huddled with the other children who had also lost everything. But her eyes searched for David in the crowd of onlookers that had formed. He had disappeared. "It was on purpose," she said to Peter. "He did it on purpose. But why? To scare me, or maybe—" Lily stopped, a terrible idea forming in her mind. Maybe he wanted to hurt me during the confusion. The next morning, Joan Collins arrived at the scene of the fire to check on the children's situation. When she learned that Lily had claimed to recognize the person responsible, her concern increased exponentially. "Lily, are you absolutely sure it was the same man?" Joan asked, sitting with the girl on the steps of the church where the children had spent the night. "I'm sure," Lily replied firmly. "It was him, the same one who pushed me in the manhole." "Can you describe him to me?" "Tall, dark brown hair, unshaven. He wore dirty clothes, like someone who works at the harbor." Lily closed her eyes, focusing on the memory. "And he had a small scar on his forehead, on the right side." Joan made detailed notes. "Lily, this is very important. I'm going to talk to the detective right away." Meanwhile, at the Manning house, Theodore received a phone call that left him deeply disturbed. "Mr. Manning," said Joan's voice on the phone, "I need to cancel Lily's visit today. There was a fire at the children's home, and she may be in danger." "In danger? What do you mean?" "She identified the man who she believes placed your son in the sewer. And that man apparently tried to attack her last night." Theodore felt the world spin around him. "Are you saying that someone actually kidnapped Henry?" "It seems that way, and that person may be trying to silence the only witness." After hanging up the phone, Theodore sat heavily in an armchair trying to process the information. Henry was on Isabella's lap, playing quietly, unaware that his life had been in real danger. "Theodore, what is it?" Isabella asked, noticing her husband's paleness. "Lily was right from the beginning," he said, running his hands over his face. "Someone really took our son. And now he's trying to hurt her so he won't be discovered." Isabella hugged Henry tighter. "My God, who would do such a thing?" "I don't know, but we're going to find out." In downtown Galveston, Detective Miller was reviewing all the records of employees who had worked for companies linked to the port in recent years. The description that Lily had given was too specific to be ignored. "Captain," he said to his subordinate, "I want a list of all the men who fit that description and who have any connection to the Manning family." "Yes, sir. Any specific suspicions?" "Maybe. Someone with a grudge against Theodore Manning. A fired employee, a business competitor, someone who feels wronged by his company." It was then that David Nelson's name appeared in the records. Fired 6 months ago from Theodore's shipping company for suspected embezzlement. "The physical description matched perfectly. We found our suspect," murmured the detective. That afternoon, a search operation was organized to find David, but he had disappeared from his former residence, and no one at the harbor had seen him. "For days. He knows we're after him," the detective said to Joan. "He's probably hiding somewhere in the city." "And Lily? Is she still in danger?" "As long as he's free, yes. I'm going to put police protection on the place where she's staying. The children from the children's home had been temporarily housed in the municipal school in precarious but safe conditions. Lily had barely managed to sleep, not only because of the uncomfortable conditions, but because of the certainty that David was somewhere nearby planning his next move. "Lily," said Peter during dinner, "do you think he'll try again?" "I don't know," she replied, stirring her food without appetite. "But I know he's afraid I'll tell the police what I saw." "And you already told them." "I already did, but maybe he doesn't know that." That night, as the children tried to sleep on mattresses spread across the floor of the school gymnasium, Lily stayed awake looking at the windows. There were 2 police officers on guard outside, but she still felt vulnerable. It was then that she heard a strange sound coming from the roof. Small noises, as if someone was walking up there. Lily woke Peter silently. "Are you hearing that?" she whispered. Peter listened carefully. "It sounds like someone's on the roof." "I need to warn the police." Lily got up carefully and walked to the nearest window. Outside, she could see one of the police officers walking through the courtyard, but the other had disappeared. That's when she saw a shadow moving on the side of the building. Someone had climbed the wall and was trying to enter through a second floor. "Window! Peter!" she whispered urgently. "Go wake up Miss Davis, quick!" But before Peter could move, the lights in the gymnasium went out completely. In the sudden darkness, the children began to wake up scared, and Lily heard the sound of glass breaking somewhere in the building. David had found a way to get in. In the dark, Lily could hear footsteps approaching. They weren't the heavy steps of the police officers or the hurried ones of Miss Davis. They were furtive steps, calculated, of someone who didn't want to be discovered. "Lily," a male voice whispered in the darkness. "I know you're here. We need to talk." Lily crouched behind a pile of mattresses, her heart beating so hard that she was sure he could hear it. Around her, other children began to cry with fear. "There's no need to be afraid," David's voice continued. "I just want you to forget what you saw in the manhole. That's all." But Lily knew he was lying. There was something in his voice, a coldness, that told her that his intentions were much darker than simply asking for silence. The footsteps came closer, and Lily saw a silhouette standing out against the faint light that came in through the windows. David was only a few feet away from her, searching among the mattresses where the children were hiding. "I know you saw me," he said, his voice now more aggressive. "And I know you already told the police, but I can still fix this." It was then that Lily made a courageous decision that would change everything. Instead of continuing to hide, she stood up and ran toward the door, screaming with all the strength she had, "Help! He's here! It's the man who took the baby!" Lily's scream echoed through the gymnasium, waking all the children and alerting the adults who were in the other rooms of the school. David, realizing that he had lost the element of surprise, ran after her toward the main door. "Get back here, girl!" he shouted, his voice full of desperation and anger. "You don't understand what you're doing." Lily ran through the dark hallways of the school with the agility of someone who had spent years surviving on the streets. She knew every corner, every door, every possible hiding place. Behind her, she could hear David's heavy footsteps gaining ground. "Help! Police!" she shouted as she ran, hoping that the guards outside would hear her cries. Miss Davis appeared at the end of the hallway, coming from the room where she had spent the night. "Lily, what's happening?" "It's him! The man who took the baby!" "He's in here!" Lily shouted, running toward the director. At that moment, David turned the corner and saw Miss Davis blocking his path to Lily. Without hesitating, he pushed the older woman hard, causing her to fall on the hard floor of the hallway. "Get out of the way!" he snarled, continuing his pursuit. Lily reached the main door and tried to open it, but it was locked from the outside to keep the children safe during the night. Desperate, she turned to look for another exit and saw David approaching, his features distorted by anger and fear. "Nowhere left to run," he said, stopping a few feet from her. "You ruined everything, girl. Because of you, I'm going to lose what little I have left." "I didn't do anything to you," Lily protested, leaning against the locked door. "I just saved the baby." "That baby shouldn't have been saved by you. Should have been found quickly by other people, causing only a scare." David ran his hands through, his hair clearly distraught. "I never wanted to hurt him for real." "Then why did you put him in the sewer?" "Because Theodore Manning destroyed my life," David exploded, taking a step closer. "I worked 15 years for him. I was loyal, honest, dedicated, and he fired me because of lies." Lily could see tears in his eyes, mixed with an anger that frightened her deeply. "But the baby has no fault in this." "I know. That's why I put him in a place where he would be found fast. I just wanted Theodore to feel a little of the despair I felt when I lost everything." David punched the wall hard. "But you showed up and ruined everything." It was at that moment that the main door burst open and 2 police officers ran in, alerted by the screams. David turned quickly, seeing his chances of escape dwindling. "Freeze!" shouted one of the police officers, drawing his weapon. "Hands up!" David looked at Lily one last time, then at the police officers. For a moment, he seemed to consider resisting. Then, slowly, he raised his hands. "All right," he said, his voice broken. "It's over." As the police officers arrested David, Lily remained leaning against the door, trembling with fear and adrenaline. Ms. Davis approached, limping slightly from the fall she had taken. "Are you okay, dear?" the director asked, hugging Lily protectively. "I am," Lily murmured, but her eyes remained fixed on David as he was led away. "Ms. Davis, he said he didn't really want to hurt Henry." "People say a lot of things when they're all desperate," Ms. Davis replied. "The important thing is that you're safe now." The next morning, Detective Miller interrogated David at the Galveston Police Department. The man looked like a shadow of the dedicated employee he had been years before. His hair was disheveled, his clothes dirty, and his red eyes showed signs of not having slept well for weeks. "David," said the detective, sitting in the chair opposite the suspect, "I'm going to be direct with you. We have witnesses, evidence, and your own confession last night. There's no way to deny what you did." "I don't deny it," David said softly, "but I want you to understand why." "Then explain it to me." David took a deep breath and began to tell his version of the story. He had worked at Theodore's shipping company for 15 years, since the age of 17. He was an exemplary employee, had never missed work, had never caused problems. "My wife, Connie, was pregnant with our first child," he said, his voice choked with emotion. "We were making plans, buying things for the baby, dreaming about the future." "What happened?" asked the detective. Discrepancies appeared in the cargo records. Goods that left one port and didn't arrive at their destination. Someone was embezzling products, and I was accused. David shook his head. "Theodore didn't even want to hear my defense. He fired me on the spot." "And you were innocent?" "Completely. I found out later that it was Rat, the night shift supervisor, who was selling the goods to smugglers. But when that was discovered, I had already lost everything." The detective made notes. "Everything as in? Without the job, I couldn't pay the bills. We lost the house. Connie had a miscarriage because of the stress." Tears began to run down David's face. "She blamed me for everything and left for Houston with her sister. I lost my family, my house, my dignity, and you decided to take revenge. It wasn't supposed to be revenge. It was supposed to be just justice. I wanted Theodore to feel a little of what I felt." David leaned forward. "I put the baby in the manhole near the market because I knew it would be found fast. I just wanted to give him a scare, make him feel despair for a few hours. But the child could have been seriously injured. I know, and I regret that every day." David covered his face with his hands. "When I saw that girl fall into the sewer with the baby, I realized I had done something terrible. Why didn't you confess right away? Because I was afraid. And because I thought that if nobody knew it had been on purpose, at least Theodore would be grateful for having recovered his son. The detective studied David for a long moment. He was clearly a man who had been broken by circumstances, but that didn't justify what he had done. David, you put the lives of 2 children at risk, one 3 months old and another 6 years old. I know. And I'll carry that guilt forever. That afternoon, Theodore Manning was called to the police station to hear David's full confession. When he heard the story, he felt a complex mixture of anger and sadness. "Detective," said Theodore after hearing everything, "I need to check the records of his dismissal." "If he really was wronged, that doesn't change what he did," said the detective. "It doesn't, but it explains." Theodore sighed deeply. "I want to talk to him." A few minutes later, Theodore was face to face with the man who had put his son in danger. David couldn't meet the eyes of his former boss. "David," Theodore said, his voice controlled but full of emotion, "if you were really wronged, why didn't you come talk to me afterwards?" "I tried. You didn't want to see me." Theodore vaguely remembered his secretary mentioning that David had called several times in the months following the dismissal, but he had instructed her not to put the calls through. "If I had known the truth at the time." "But you didn't know." "And I did a terrible thing because of my anger." David finally looked at Theodore. "How's your son?" "Well, thanks to Lily." "That girl is special," David said softly. "She risked her own life to save a child she didn't know." "She is, and you almost killed her twice." "I know, and I know there's no forgiveness for that." Theodore remained silent for a few moments, processing everything he had heard. "David, I'm going to investigate your dismissal. If you were wronged, I'll try to correct the mistake, but that doesn't change the fact that you'll have to pay for what you did. I understand, and I accept the consequences." When Theodore left the police station, his mind was full of conflicting thoughts. On the one hand, he felt anger at what David had done to Henry and Lily. On the other, he felt guilt for perhaps having been unfair to a loyal employee. But there was one thing about which he had no doubts. Lily had saved not only his son's life, but had also exposed the truth about what had really happened. And for that, she deserved much more than weekly supervised visits. 3 weeks had passed since David's arrest, and life in Galveston was beginning to return to normal. The children's home was being rebuilt with donations from the community, and the children had been transferred to more suitable temporary facilities in the city's old rectory. Lily had resumed her weekly visits to the Mannings, but something had changed in the family dynamic. Henry, now 4 months old, had grown noticeably, and his bond with Lily had become even stronger. Every time she arrived, he smiled immediately and refused to stay in anyone else's arms. "It's like he's your son," Theodore commented one Tuesday afternoon, watching Lily feed Henry a bottle in the garden of the house. Isabella, who was next to him on the porch, didn't respond. In recent weeks, her initial hostility towards Lily had turned into something more complex, a mixture of gratitude and unease that she couldn't fully explain. "Theodore," Isabella said finally, "don't you think it's strange how Henry reacts to her? It's as if what? As if he recognized her from somewhere before the incident in the sewer." Theodore frowned. "What do you mean?" "I can't explain it. It's just a feeling." At that moment, Joan Collins arrived for her weekly supervision. In recent weeks, she had been investigating the history of Lily and her mother more deeply, and some discoveries had left her intrigued. "Good afternoon," Joan greeted, sitting down on a garden chair near Lily. "How's our special girl today?" "Well," Lily replied, smiling. "Henry was waiting for me. Mrs. Manning said he hadn't wanted to drink milk since yesterday because he knew I was coming today." "Interesting," Joan murmured, taking notes. "Lily, can I ask you some questions about your mother?" "Sure. Do you remember Her having worked here in this house. Lily stopped rocking Henry and looked at Joan in surprise. Here, at Mr. Manning's house? Yes. I found old records that show that Carol Johnson worked as a domestic servant for the Manning family about 2 years ago. Theodore and Isabella exchanged surprised glances at the revelation. Carol Johnson, murmured Theodore. The name sounds familiar, but I don't remember an employee with that name. It was a temporary job, Joan explained. Just a few weeks. During the period when Mrs. Manning was expecting Henry, Isabella paled. During my pregnancy, according to the records, yes. She was hired to help with cleaning and organizing the house during the last months of the pregnancy. Lily looked at Isabella with curiosity. You were expecting Henry when my mom worked here? Apparently, yes, Isabella replied, but there was something in her voice that suggested she was remembering something. There's something else, said Joan, consulting her notes. According to what I've been able to ascertain, Carol stopped working here very abruptly. She simply didn't show up anymore. That was shortly before Henry was born, said Theodore now, vaguely remembering the details. I remember Isabella was upset because she lost the help just when she needed it most. Isabella was visibly uncomfortable with the direction of the conversation. Theodore, maybe we can talk about this in private. Why? Asked Lily, noticing the tension. Did something happen to my mom here? Nothing serious, Isabella said quickly. It's just that, well, the circumstances of her departure were a little confusing. Joan leaned forward. Confusing as in? Isabella looked at Theodore, who nodded encouragingly. Well, there were some discrepancies. What kind of discrepancies? Some things were disappearing from the house. Small things, nothing very valuable, but Isabella hesitated. We suspected she might be taking them. Lily felt like she had been punched in the stomach. My mom didn't steal. She was honest. Lily, calm down, said Theodore, seeing the girl's reaction. No one is accusing your mother of anything. But you just said you suspected she was stealing. We suspected, Isabella repeated, but we were never sure. That's why we never formally accused her. She simply stopped coming, added Theodore. We assumed she had found a better job. Lily shook her head vigorously. My mom would never take anything that wasn't hers. Never! Joan observed the interaction with professional interest. There was something in Isabella's reaction that suggested she knew more than she was saying. Mrs. Manning, said Joan carefully, do you remember specifically what was disappearing? Small things. A bracelet that I rarely wore, some expensive. Cosmetics, money that I left on the dresser? Isabella paused. And some baby clothes that I was preparing for Henry? Baby clothes. Yes, I had bought a very beautiful set, blue with white details. It had delicate embroidery and was very expensive. When I went to look for it after Henry was born, it wasn't there anymore. Lily frowned. There was something familiar about that description, but she couldn't identify what. And you really believed that my mom had taken these things? Asked Lily, her voice full of sadness and indignation. As I said, we only suspected, Isabella repeated. But we never had proof. Because there was nothing to prove, exclaimed Lily, getting up from the chair and still holding Henry. My mom was the most honest person in the world. Henry, feeling Lily's agitation, began to cry. Automatically, she began to rock him and hum softly, calming him immediately. Lily, said Theodore gently, no one here is judging your mother. These were just misunderstandings from the past, misunderstandings that made you think she was a thief, said Lily, tears starting to run down her face. Joan intervened. Lily, the important thing is that this was a long time ago. What matters now is your present and your future. But it does matter, Lily protested. My mom was good. She took care of me, worked hard, never took anything from anyone. Isabella got up from the chair, clearly uncomfortable. Theodore, I think I should go inside. This conversation is becoming too tense. Wait, said Joan, an idea forming in her mind. Mrs. Manning, do you still have the clothes that Henry wore as a baby? Of course. I kept everything. Why? I'd like to take a look, if you don't mind. For what? Just professional curiosity. Isabella hesitated, then nodded. They're in his room. I'll get them. As Isabella entered the house, Lily continued to cradle Henry, who had stopped crying, but remained attentive to the sound of her voice. Theodore watched the interaction, impressed as always by the bond between them. Lily, he said softly, regardless of what happened in the past between your mother and us, you saved my son's life. That's what matters. But if you thought my mum was a thief, why do you let me take care of Henry? Because you're you. You're not your mother. And because, Theodore paused, searching for the right words. Because I see in the way you take care of him that you have a pure heart. A few minutes later, Isabella returned carrying a box of baby clothes. Joan began to examine the pieces one by one, looking for something specific. This one, said Isabella, pulling out a blue set with delicate embroidery, is similar to the one that disappeared. I bought two of the same at the time. Lily looked at the set and felt her heart stop. She knew those clothes. She had seen something identical before. But where? Then, like a lightning bolt, the memory returned. Her mother had come home one day with a set exactly like that, saying that a boss had given it to her because it didn't fit anymore. Lily remembered asking who it was for, since they didn't know any babies. For a family that needs it, her mother had replied at the time. Now, looking at the set in Isabella's hands, Lily understood what had really happened. And the truth was very different from what anyone imagined. Lily watched the set of clothes in Isabella's hands, her mind racing to organize fragmented memories that suddenly made sense. There was something else about that day that her mother had come home with the baby clothes, something important that she had forgotten. Mrs. Manning, said Lily hesitantly, when exactly did my mother stop working here? As I said, it was shortly before Henry was born, about 15 days before the delivery. Lily frowned. And when was he born? In December. December 15th, replied Theodore, not understanding where the conversation was going. December, Lily repeated softly, doing mental calculations. My mother came home with the baby clothes at the end of November. She said she was going to give it to a family that needed it. Joan leaned forward, realizing that Lily was remembering something important. Lily, can you remember anything else about that day? She was acting strangely when she arrived, nervous. She said she wasn't going to work at the rich family's house anymore because... Lily paused, concentrating on the memory. Because something very serious had happened. Something serious? Asked Theodore. She said a lady had gotten very sick, that there was blood, and that she had to call for help. Lily looked at Isabella. Mrs. Manning, did you get sick when you were pregnant? Isabella paled visibly. Well, Isabella, said Theodore, noticing his wife's reaction. What is it? There was the night that I had that hemorrhage, murmured Isabella, as if talking to herself. I vaguely remember a woman. But the doctor said I'd lost a lot of blood and was confused. Joan grabbed her pen. Can you tell us exactly what happened? Isabella sat down heavily, the set of clothes still in her hands. It was at the end of November. I was alone at home because Theodore had traveled to Houston on business. Suddenly, I started to feel terrible pains and bleed a lot. And what happened next? I remember trying to call for help, but I was too weak. I thought I was going to die right there. Isabella paused, concentrating on the memories. Then someone appeared. A woman. She helped me lie down, called the ambulance, stayed with me until the doctors arrived. Lily felt tears welling up in her eyes. It was my mom. I couldn't see well because of the pain and blood loss, but I remember a soft voice, gentle hands helping me. Isabella looked at Lily. It could have been her, yes. But then why did? You suspect her of stealing the things? Asked Joan. Because the next day, when I came back from the hospital, some things had disappeared. And since she had been the only person in the house... Isabella trailed off, realizing what had happened. Ma'am, said Lily with a choked voice, my mom didn't steal anything. She took those things to take to a family that was in great need. What family? Ours, said Lily simply. We were starving. We didn't have money to buy food, let alone baby clothes. The silence that followed was profound and charged with emotion. Theodore ran his hands over his face, processing the information. But why did she take baby clothes specifically, if you didn't have a baby? Asked Isabella. Lily took a deep breath, knowing that she was going to have to tell a part of the story that she had never shared with anyone. Because my mother was pregnant. Pregnant? Exclaimed Theodore and Isabella simultaneously. She lost the baby a few weeks later. That's why she was so sad in the last months before the accident. Lily squeezed Henry against her chest. It was going to be my little brother. Joan stopped writing and looked at Lily with an expression of deep compassion. Lily, did your mother never tell you why she took those things? She said the boss had given it to her because she didn't need it anymore. My mom never lied to me, so I believed it. Lily looked at Isabella. But now I understand. She saw you getting sick, saved your life and the baby's life, and thought you wouldn't need those things anymore because she thought you had lost the baby. The revelation hit everyone like a lightning bolt. Isabella covered her mouth with her hands, tears running down her face. My God, she whispered, she thought we had lost Henry because of the hemorrhage. And that's why she took the little clothes for her baby, completed Theodore, his voice full of emotion. She wasn't stealing. She was recycling things that she thought weren't going to be used anymore. But why didn't she come back to work afterwards? Asked Joan. Because she must have been ashamed, said Lily. When she found out that you were well and that the baby was going to be born, she must have realized that she had done something wrong, even unintentionally. Isabella got up and walked to Lily. Lily, your mother saved my life and Henry's life that night. If she hadn't called the ambulance when she did, we both would have died. So why did you never find out who it was that helped? Because when I woke up in the hospital, she was already gone. And in the following days, I was so worried about the disappearance of the things that I didn't even think to find out who the woman who saved me had been. Theodore approached the two. Lily, that means your mother gave us life twice, once when she saved Isabella and Henry before he was born, and again when you saved Henry from the sewer. It's like it was destiny, murmured Joan, observing the scene. At that moment, Henry, who had been quiet in Lily's arms throughout the conversation, began to make small, happy sounds, as if he understood that something important had been resolved. You know something strange, said Isabella, looking at her son. Henry has always been calm with Lily from the first moment. It's as if he recognized her from somewhere. Maybe he does recognize her, said Lily. Maybe babies feel these things that adults can't understand. What do you mean? My mom always said that she sang to her belly when she was pregnant. The same song that I sing to Henry. Lily looked at the baby in her arms. If she sang that song when she was taking care of you, maybe he heard it from inside your belly. Isabella was silent for a long moment, then extended her arms. Can I hold him? Lily handed Henry to Isabella, who held him with an expression of gratitude mixed with regret. Lily, said Isabella, her voice trembling, can I ask you for forgiveness? In the name of your mother, too. Forgiveness for what? For having thought badly of her, for not having recognized that she saved us, for having let her leave thinking she had done something wrong, when in fact she had done something heroic. Lily looked at Isabella with her big, wise eyes. My mom always said, that people do the best they can with what they know at the time. You didn't know the whole truth, but now we know, said Theodore, and that changes everything. Changes how? Asked Lily. Theodore and Isabella exchanged glances, a silent communication passing between them. Then Theodore knelt in front of Lily. Lily, you saved our son. Your mother saved our family. You two are part of our history, part of who we are. He paused, carefully choosing his words. We don't think it's fair for you to continue living at the children's home when you could be here with Henry, where you two clearly feel good together. What are you saying? We're saying, said Isabella, passing Henry back to Lily, that we would like to adopt you, officially, forever. Lily looked at them in surprise, then at Henry, then back at them. You want me to be part of the family for real? You already are, said Theodore. We just want to make it official. Joan, who had observed the whole scene with growing emotion, wiped her eyes. Well, that would certainly facilitate my report. Lily still seemed to be processing the proposal. But what if I do something wrong? What if you change your mind? Families don't change their minds, said Isabella firmly. Families stick together, no matter what happens. And Henry? Would he like to have a big sister? As if understanding the question, Henry smiled at Lily and stretched out his little hand to touch her face. I think he already answered, said Theodore, smiling. The next 2 months were an emotional roller coaster for everyone involved. Although Theodore and Isabella had made the decision to adopt Lily, they quickly discovered that the legal bureaucracy was much more complex than they imagined. It's not as simple as you think, explained the family's lawyer, Dr. Morales, during a meeting in his office. There are strict protocols for adoption, especially when the child is already under the guardianship of the state. But the circumstances are special, argued Theodore. Lily saved our son, and now we discovered that her mother saved us too. I understand the emotional situation, said the lawyer, but the law doesn't work based on emotions. We need to follow all the procedures. Isabella was visibly frustrated. How long is this going to take? At least 6 months, possibly more. Meanwhile, Lily continued living at the rectory with the other children from the orphanage, but now her visits to the Mannings had become almost daily. Theodore had obtained special authorization for her to spend the afternoons with the family, always returning to sleep in the temporary accommodation. It's not fair, Lily said to Peter one night, lying on her makeshift bed. They want to adopt. Me, I want to be adopted, but the adults keep talking about papers and more papers. At least you're sure you're going to have a family, replied Peter. I don't even know if anyone will ever want me. Lily turned to look at her friend. Of course they'll want you. You're smart, funny, and you always helped me when I needed it. But I'm not 6 years old and I haven't saved any babies. You don't need to save anyone to deserve a family. During this period, the relationship between Lily and Henry continued to strengthen in ways that surprised even the experts. Dr. Ramirez, a child psychologist from Houston who had been called in to assess the situation, was impressed with what she observed. It's extraordinary, she said to Theodore and Isabella after 2 weeks of observation. I've never seen such a strong bond between two children who are not biological siblings. Is it safe for both of their development? Asked Isabella. Not only safe, but beneficial. Henry is developing above average for his age, and Lily is showing signs of accelerated emotional healing since she started spending more time here. Emotional healing? Asked Theodore. She's been through significant trauma, losing her mother, living on the streets, the incident in the sewer, the fire. But taking care of Henry is channeling her protective instincts in a positive way. It's helping her process her own losses. However, not everything was going well. Ms. Davis, the director of the orphanage, had become increasingly resistant to Lily's special arrangement. This isn't fair to the other children, she complained to Joan during one of the supervision visits. Lily is being treated as special while the others continue waiting for families. Her situation is unique, replied Joan, all situations are unique, but I don't see anyone fighting so hard for the other children. This tension came to a head when Ms. Davis made a decision that caught everyone by surprise. On a Thursday morning, she informed Lily that the daily visits to the Mannings would be suspended. "Why?" asked Lily, tears welling up in her eyes. "Because you're becoming too dependent on them, and they on you. This isn't healthy until the adoption is official. But Henry needs me. Henry has parents. He'll learn to be okay without you." When Theodore arrived to pick up Lily that afternoon and learned of the decision, he was furious. "This is absurd," he said to Ms. Davis. "You can't simply cut off contact between two children who have such a strong bond." "I can and I will," replied Ms. Davis firmly. "Until the adoption papers are finalized, Lily is my responsibility, and I've decided that this arrangement is no longer appropriate. Then we'll speed up the adoption process. Do what you want. But while she's under my care, the rules are mine." That night, Lily cried herself to sleep. For the first time in months, she felt abandoned again. Peter tried to comfort her, but nothing he said seemed to help. "What if they give up on me?" sobbed Lily. "What if they decide it's too complicated?" "They won't give up," said Peter. "I saw how they look at you. It's like my parents looked at me before the accident. But Miss Davis said it's only until the papers are ready. What if it takes a year? What if it takes 2 years? At the Manning house, the situation was no better. Henry had spent the whole day crying, refusing to eat or sleep. Neither Theodore nor Isabella could calm him. "He's looking for her," said Isabella, exhausted after hours of trying to comfort her son. "It's like he knows that something has changed." "We can't let this continue," said Theodore. "I'm going to talk to the lawyer tomorrow about legal measures." "What kind of measures?" "I don't know yet, but there has to be some way to get temporary custody faster." The next morning, Dr. Morales had a different proposal. "You can file for an emergency guardianship order," he explained, claiming that the separation is causing psychological harm to both children. "Would that work?" asked Theodore. "Maybe, especially if we can get the support of the psychologist and other specialists." "And how long would it take?" "A few weeks, if we're lucky." Meanwhile, Lily had made a decision of her own. If she couldn't see Henry officially, she would find a way unofficially. That night, after everyone in the accommodation had fallen asleep, she got up quietly and headed to the window. "Where are you going?" whispered Peter, who apparently wasn't. "Sleeping, to see if Henry's okay." "Lily, if Ms. Davis finds out, she won't find out if you don't tell." "What if they catch you on the street?" "They won't catch me. I know all the paths in the city in the dark." Peter sighed. "Do you want me to go with you?" "No. If they find out you helped me, you'll get in trouble too." Lily climbed out of the window and began her nocturnal walk to the Manning house. When she arrived there, she saw lights on in all the windows again. She could hear Henry's crying. Even from the street, she approached the living room window carefully and saw Theodore and Isabella taking turns trying to calm the baby. Both looked exhausted and desperate. Without thinking about the consequences, Lily began to hum softly the song that always calmed Henry. The effect was immediate. The crying stopped, and she saw Theodore and Isabella look at the window. Theodore approached the window and saw her. Instead of getting angry, he simply opened the front door. "Come in," he said. "Quick, before someone sees you." "I know I can't be here," said Lily when she entered the house. "But I heard him crying." "He hasn't stopped crying since yesterday," said Isabella, passing Henry to Lily. Immediately the baby calmed down. "Miss Davis said he would learn to be okay without me." "Miss Davis is wrong," said Theodore firmly, "and we're going to prove it." "How?" "We've already filed for an emergency guardianship order. With the support of specialists and evidence like tonight, we're going to show the judge that you two need to be together." Lily looked at Henry, who had fallen asleep peacefully in her arms. "What if it doesn't work?" "It will work," said Isabella with determination, "because we're not going to give up. Families don't give up on each other. That morning, Lily returned to the accommodation with a lighter heart, but knowing that the next few days would be crucial in determining whether she and Henry could finally be together forever. The Galveston Island Shrimp Festival arrived in our town with all its traditional pomp and celebration, but for Lily, the festivity seemed distant and meaningless. A week had passed since Miss Davis had prohibited her visits to the Mannings, and each day that passed felt like an eternity. The children from the temporary accommodation had been taken to watch the festivities at the pier, but Lily sat on a bench, watching the colourful dances without really seeing them. Peter sat next to her, sharing a shrimp skewer he had won from a vendor. "You're not having fun," he observed. "How can I have fun knowing that Henry is suffering?" replied Lily, her eyes fixed on the festive crowd. "Maybe he's better. Maybe he's gotten used to it." "No, Peter, I know he hasn't. I feel it here," she said, placing her hand on her chest. "He still needs me." At that moment, Lily saw something that made her heart leap. Across the pier, walking through the crowd, was Theodore carrying Henry in his arms. Even from a distance, she could see that the baby was restless, fidgeting constantly in his father's arms. "It's them," Lily said to Peter, getting up from the bench. "Lily," Miss Davis said not to stray from the group, but Lily was already walking in the direction of the Manning family, pushed by an impulse stronger than any rule. When she got close enough for Henry to see her, the baby immediately reached his arms out to her, making sounds of excitement. "Lily!" exclaimed Theodore, surprised but clearly relieved. "I'm so glad to see you." "How's Henry?" she asked, observing the baby, who clearly wanted to go into her arms. "He's not good," admitted Theodore. "He can't sleep properly. He doesn't want to eat. The doctors said there's nothing physically wrong with him. Can I hold him?" Theodore looked around, checking if Miss Davis was nearby. Not seeing any sign of her, he handed Henry to Lily. The baby's relief was immediate and visible. "Hi, little one," whispered Lily, rocking him gently. "I missed you too." Isabella appeared from the crowd, carrying some purchases from the festival. When she saw Lily with Henry, her face lit up. "Lily, how are you?" "Sad," replied Lily honestly. "And worried about him." "We're worried too," said Isabella. "Dr. Morales said that the hearing for the emergency guardianship is next week, but what?" Theodore and Isabella exchanged a worried look. "There are some complications." "What kind of complications?" "Ms. Davis is contesting the request," explained Theodore. "She claims that we're creating an unhealthy dependency between you two." "But look at him," said Lily, pointing to how Henry was calm and happy in her arms for the first time in days. "How can that be unhealthy?" "We know that," said Isabella, "but the legal system is complicated." At that moment, a familiar and authoritative voice echoed behind them. "Lily Johnson!" Everyone turned to see Miss Davis approaching with a furious expression on her face. "What do you think you're doing? I just—" began Lily, but Miss Davis interrupted her. "You disobeyed direct orders. Hand over the baby immediately and come with me." "Please," pleaded Lily, tears beginning to form in her eyes. "Just a few more minutes. Now!" Reluctantly, Lily handed Henry back to Theodore. The baby immediately began to cry, reaching his arms out towards her. Miss Davis," said Theodore, trying to remain calm, "it's clear that these children have a special connection. Separating them is causing unnecessary suffering. Mr. Manning, I respect your position, but Lily is my responsibility," and she broke important rules. Miss Davis took Lily by the arm. "There will be consequences for this disobedience." As Lily was led away, Henry cried louder and louder, his wails echoing through the pier and creating a scene that caught the attention of many people. Several families stopped to watch, commenting among themselves about the strange situation. "Who's that child?" asked an elderly lady to her husband. "Must be the girl who saved the Manning's son," he replied. "I heard the whole story at the market," And why are they separating them if it's obvious that the baby wants to be with her? Red tape, said the man, shaking his head in disapproval. Back at the accommodation, Lily was placed in confinement in a small, windowless room, without the right to participate in the rest of the festivities. Peter tried to convince Miss Davis to be more lenient, but was reprimanded as well. You need to understand that rules exist for a reason, Miss Davis said to the other children. When someone breaks them, there are consequences. Alone in the dark. Room, Lily cried until she had no more tears left. For the first time since she had been rescued from the sewer, she felt completely hopeless. What if Miss Davis managed to prevent the adoption? What if she could never see Henry again? At the Manning house, the situation was equally tense. Henry had cried uninterruptedly for 3 hours after the encounter at the festival, and was now in a state of exhaustion that deeply worried his parents. "This can't continue," said Isabella, watching her son fall asleep restlessly in his crib. "He's wearing himself out physically." "Dr. Morales said we can document this as evidence for the hearing," said Theodore. "The more signs that the separation is harming both children, the stronger our case becomes. But what if it's not enough? It has to be. I won't accept bureaucracy becoming more important than the well-being of 2 children." The next day, while Lily was still in confinement, Peter made a disturbing discovery. During the morning activities, he overheard Miss Davis talking on the phone in her office, and what he heard left him alarmed. "Yes, I understand your concern," Miss Davis was saying to someone on the other end of the line, "but you need to understand that this situation is creating dangerous precedents." Peter moved closer to the door, trying to hear better. "If we allow wealthy families to simply choose the children they want based on emotional bonds, what happens to the others? Lily is receiving special treatment that the other children aren't receiving." There was a pause, then Miss Davis continued, "Exactly. That's why I'm recommending that the emergency guardianship order be denied. The girl needs to learn to adapt to the system like any other orphan child." Peter felt his blood run cold. Miss Davis wasn't just being strict with the rules, she was actively working against Lily's adoption. When he managed to find a moment to talk to Lily alone during lunchtime, Peter told her what he had heard. "She's trying to prevent you from being adopted," he whispered, checking if anyone was listening. "It's not just about rules. She really doesn't want you to go to the Manning family." "But why?" asked Lily, confused and hurt. "I think it's because she wants to show that all children are equal, that you shouldn't have special treatment just because you saved a baby. But I didn't ask for special treatment. I just want to be with Henry." "I know. But Ms. Davis sees things differently." Lily was silent for a long moment, processing this information. Then a determination that Peter had never seen before appeared in her eyes. "Peter," she said softly, "I need to get out of here." "What do you mean?" "I need to tell Mr. Manning what Miss Davis is doing. If she's working against the adoption, they need to know. Lily, if you run away again, Miss Davis can use that as evidence that you're problematic. And if I don't do anything, she's going to manage to prevent me from having a family." Lily looked out the window in the direction of the city. "I can't let that happen. Henry needs me, and I need him." "When?" "Tonight, after everyone falls asleep. Do you want me to go with you?" "No. If something goes wrong, I don't want you to get in trouble too." Lily held her friend's hand. "But thank you for warning me about Miss Davis. You're the best friend I've ever had." That night, as Galveston slept after the first day of the Shrimp Festival, Lily prepared for what might be her last chance to fight for her family. At midnight, Lily quietly climbed out of the window of the temporary accommodation, determined to reach the Manning house before Miss Davis could cause more damage to the adoption process. The streets of Galveston were deserted after the first day of the festival, with only some distant sounds of music echoing from bars that were still open. Lily knew every shadow, every alley, every shortcut in the city. During her years living on the streets, she had mentally mapped out all the safe routes to move without being seen. Now, that experience would be crucial to reaching her destination without being discovered. When she was just 2 blocks away from the Manning house, Lily heard strange sounds coming from the direction of the residence. They weren't the normal sounds of a house sleeping. There were loud voices, movement, something that suggested turmoil. She approached carefully, hiding behind the trees that surrounded the property. What she saw made her freeze with terror. David Nelson was there, but that was impossible. He was supposed to be in prison paying for what he had done. How was he free? And more importantly, what was he doing at the Manning house in the middle of the night? Lily saw David talking intensely with someone outside the house. She couldn't distinguish the other person in the darkness, but she could hear fragments of the conversation. "I can't stay here for long," said the unidentified voice. "I just need a few minutes," replied David. "After that, I'll be gone forever. If anyone finds out I helped you out..." "No one will find out. You owe me this." Lily felt her heart race. David had escaped from prison, or worse, someone had helped him escape. And now he was back, probably looking to get revenge on Henry or her. Without thinking twice, Lily came out of her hiding place and ran toward the main door of the house, screaming with all the strength she had. "Mr. Manning! Mrs. Manning! David is here! Run away with Henry!" The lights in the house came on immediately, and Lily heard movement inside. David turned in the direction of the scream, his eyes widening when he saw the girl who had tormented his thoughts for months. "You!" he roared, running towards Lily. "It's always you ruining everything!" Lily ran for the front door, but David was faster. He caught her when she was a few feet from the entrance, grabbing her arm tightly. "You destroyed my life," he shouted, out of his mind. "Because of you, I lost everything I had left." "Leave her alone," shouted a familiar voice. Theodore had come out of the house, carrying Henry, and followed closely by Isabella. When he saw David holding Lily, his expression transformed into pure fury. "Let her go now," ordered Theodore. "Not until she promises me that she'll forget what she saw." "Adieu," replied David, desperate. "I can't go back to prison." "How did you get out of there?" asked Isabella, trying to remain calm while assessing the situation. It was then that a figure emerged from the shadows, revealing the identity of the person who had helped David. To everyone's shock, it was Rat, the former night supervisor from Theodore's company. "Rat!" exclaimed Theodore, incredulous. "You were involved in this?" "I'm sorry, boss," said Rat, clearly regretful, "but it was my fault that David lost his job. When I found out he was in prison because of it, I couldn't let it go." "So it was you who was embezzling the goods," said Theodore, the pieces of the puzzle finally falling into place. "It was. And I let David take the blame because it was easier." Rat looked at David. "But that doesn't justify what you did with the baby." "I never wanted to hurt the baby," shouted David, still holding Lily. "I just wanted justice." "Let the girl go," said Rat. "This has gone too far." "No, she's the only one who can identify me as the person who put the baby in the sewer. If she dies..." "David, no," shouted Rat, realizing the direction of his friend's thoughts. But David was beyond reason. Months of prison, guilt, and despair had completely broken his sanity. He began to drag Lily toward Galveston Bay, which ran a few feet from the Manning. "Property! If I can't have my life back, at least I'll make sure she can't denounce me," he shouted. Lily tried to break free, but David was much stronger. "Please," she begged, "I won't tell anyone, I promise." Too late for promises. Theodore handed Henry to Isabella and began to follow David, but stopped when he realized that any sudden movement could make the desperate man hurt Lily. "David," said Theodore, trying to use a calming tone, "if you hurt that girl, there will never be a chance for forgiveness. But if you let her go now, we can talk about everything." "Talk about what? About how you destroyed my life based on lies?" about how I can try to correct the mistake I made." David stopped for a moment, considering. The words. How? Rat confessed that he was the one who was stealing. "I can clear your name, give you compensation, help you rebuild your life. And my family? Can you bring my wife back? Can you bring my son who was never born?" "I can't undo the past," admitted Theodore, "but I can help you have a future." For a few seconds, it seemed that David was considering the proposal. Then the crying of Henry in Isabella's arms broke the moment of hesitation. "It's too late," said David, and began to drag Lily again towards the water. It was then that something unexpected happened. Peter appeared running through the trees, shouting and making as much noise as possible. "Help, police! Someone's trying to hurt Lily." The distraction was enough for Lily to manage to break free from David's grip. She ran toward Theodore, but David pursued her immediately. "You won't escape," he shouted. Lily tripped and fell a few feet from the shore of the bay. David approached her, and for one terrible moment it seemed that everything had ended. But then the sirens of the police began to sound in the distance. Peter had managed to alert the authorities. "It's over, David," said Theodore, approaching carefully. "The police are coming. Don't make things worse for yourself." David looked around, realizing that he was surrounded. Rat had disappeared into the shadows, abandoning him. Peter continued to shout for help, and the sirens were getting closer and closer. "You're right," said David finally, his voice broken by defeat. "It's over." He moved away from Lily and sat heavily on a rock near the water, covering his face with his hands. "I just wanted my life back," he sobbed. "I just wanted someone to pay for what they did to me." Lily got up slowly, still trembling from the scare. Instead of running away from David, she approached him. "I understand," she said softly. "I also wanted someone to pay for the pain I felt when I lost my mom." David looked at her through the tears. "How can you understand me? I tried to hurt you. Because when we lose the people we love, sometimes we do things that we wouldn't normally do." Lily paused. "But hurting other people doesn't bring back who we lost." "I know," whispered David. "I know that now." The police lights finally arrived, illuminating the scene by the water. When the police officers saw David sitting peacefully on the rock and Lily next to him, they were confused about the situation. "This is the man who escaped from prison," explained Theodore to the detective who had arrived with the group. "A dean, but I don't think he's going to cause any more problems." As David was led away for the second time, he looked at Lily one last time. "Thank you," he said softly, "for reminding me that there's still goodness in the world." Lily nodded to him, knowing that she would probably never see him again, but hoping that he would find peace wherever he went. "How did you know I was here?" asked Lily to Peter when they finally had a moment to talk. "I woke up and saw that you had left. I knew you would come here." Peter smiled. "We're friends. Friends take care of each other." Theodore approached them, still carrying Henry, who had calmed down completely since Lily was safe. "Lily," he said, "I never want to live through a scare like this again." "You almost—" "I know," said Lily, "but I also discovered something important today." "What?" "That no matter what Miss Davis or anyone else does to separate us, we're a family, and families always find a way to stay together." Henry, as if understanding every word, smiled at Lily and stretched out his little hand to touch her face. And at that moment, under the stars of Galveston, everyone knew that nothing and no one could separate them again. The hearing to determine. Lily's guardianship was scheduled for the Monday following the incident with David. The judge responsible for the case, Dr. Harrison, had requested the presence of everyone involved. Theodore and Isabella Manning, Lily, Miss Davis, Joan Collins, and several specialists who had been following the case. On the morning of the hearing, Lily was nervous as she had never been before. Peter had obtained special permission to accompany her as emotional support, and held her hand firmly while they waited in the hallway of the Galveston courthouse. "It's going to be all right," whispered Peter. "After everything that's happened, they have to see that you belong to the same family. What if the judge believes Ms. Davis? What if he decides that I'm too problematic? Then he would be the blindest judge in the world," replied Peter with conviction. Across the hallway, Theodore and Isabella were talking in hushed tones with Dr. Morales, reviewing the legal arguments for the last time. Isabella held Henry, who was restless and looking for Lily with eyes. "Remember," the lawyer was saying, "the focus must always be on the children's well-being. We have solid medical, psychological, and testimonial evidence." "What about Rat's confession about the theft at the company?" asked Theodore. "That helps establish that David was wronged, which partially explains his actions, but doesn't justify them. The important thing is that it demonstrates that you were also victims of a complex situation." When they were called to enter the courtroom, Lily felt her legs tremble. The room was large and formal, with a high table where the judge would sit and several chairs arranged in rows. The judge, Dr. Thompson, was a man of about 60 years old, with grey hair and a serious but not hostile expression. He had worked with family cases for more than 20 years and had seen situations of all kinds. "Good morning to everyone," he said, sitting in his chair. "We are here to decide on the guardianship of the minor Lily Johnson. I will hear all sides before making my decision." Ms. Davis was the first to speak. She stood up and began to present her arguments against the adoption. "Your Honor," she said formally, "while I recognize the Manning family's gratitude for Lily's heroic action, I must emphasize that this child has demonstrated problematic behavior and tendencies of disobedience that have intensified since she began to frequent their home." "Can you elaborate on these behaviors?" asked the judge. "Nighttime runaways, non-compliance with rules, creation of obsessive bonds." "Lily escaped from the accommodation 3 times, always to go to the Manning house. This demonstrates an inability to accept limits and structure." Lily felt tears welling up in her eyes. The way Ms. Davis described her actions made it seem like she was a problematic and dangerous child. "Furthermore," continued Ms. Davis, "allowing this adoption would create a dangerous precedent. Other families might think they can simply choose children based on temporary emotional bonds instead of following the appropriate processes." The judge made notes and then addressed Dr. Morales. "Does the defense wish to respond?" Dr. Morales stood up and walked to the center of the room. "Your Honor, the actions of Lily that Ms. Davis classifies as problematic are, in fact, demonstrations of loyalty, love, and extraordinary protective instincts for a 6-year-old. He gestured towards Henry. "This child saved the life of a baby, risking her own life, and when she was forcibly separated from him, she fought to maintain the bond because she knew instinctively that both needed each other. We have here," continued the lawyer, "medical and psychological reports that prove that the separation between Lily and Henry is causing real damage to both children. Henry developed symptoms of infant depression when separated from Lily, and she demonstrates signs of severe anxiety." Dr. Ramirez, the child psychologist, was called to testify. "In 15 years of practice," she said, "I have never seen such a strong and mutually beneficial bond between 2 children. Separating Lily and Henry would be, in my professional opinion, a form of emotional abuse." "What about the alleged behavioral and problems?" asked the judge. "Lily demonstrates exceptional emotional maturity for her age. Her runaways were attempts to protect and care for someone she loves. This is not problematic behavior, it's heroic behavior." Joan Collins was also called to give her testimony. "During my investigation, I discovered that Lily's mother, Carol Johnson, had saved the life of Mrs. Isabella Manning and Henry during a medical emergency. There is a deep connection between these families that goes beyond chance." "Can you explain that connection further?" asked the judge. Carol Johnson was working for the Mannings when Isabella had a severe hemorrhage that could have been fatal. She called for medical help and remained with Isabella until the ambulance arrived, saving 2 lives. Months later, Lily saved Henry's life when he was placed in danger by a third party. The judge looked at Lily. "Lily, would you like to say anything?" Lily stood up, her legs trembling. "Yes, sir. Feel free. I know I ran away a few times, and I know I broke rules. But I only did that because Henry needed me." Her voice became firmer as she continued. "My mom always taught me that when someone we love is suffering, we do whatever it takes to help." "And do you consider Henry part of your family?" "Yes, sir. And Mr. and Mrs. Manning too. Not because they have money or a beautiful house, but because they love me and I love them." "How do you know they love you?" "Because when I'm sad, they comfort me. When I'm scared, they protect me. And when I make mistakes, they forgive me but help me do better." Lily looked at Theodore and Isabella. "That's what families do." The judge made more notes. "Mr. and Mrs. Manning, why do you want to adopt Lily?" Theodore stood up. "Your Honor, Lily not only saved our son's life, she taught us what unconditional love means. At 6 years old, she has more courage, compassion, and loyalty than many adults." Isabella joined her husband. "When I see Lily with Henry, I see a big sister protecting her little brother. I see the kind of person we want Henry to become, someone who cares more about others than himself." "And are you prepared for the challenges of raising a child who has gone through trauma?" asked the judge. "We are," replied Theodore. "We have already hired specialized therapy and will do everything necessary to help Lily process her past experiences." At that moment, something unexpected happened. Peter stood up from his chair. "Excuse me, Your Honor," he said timidly. "Yes?" The judge looked at Miss Davis, then at Dr. Morales. "What is your relationship with the minor?" "I'm her best friend. I live in the same place as her." "Very well. What would you like to say?" "That if you don't let Lily stay with the Manning family, you'll be doing the most unfair thing in the world." Peter took a deep breath. "Lily spent 2 years taking care of other children at the orphanage when they got sick. She shared food when she had almost nothing. She protected me from older boys who wanted to beat me up. And now, when she has finally found a family who really wants her, the adults are creating rules to prevent it." Peter looked directly at the judge. "The rules should serve to protect children, not to hurt them." The judge was silent for a long moment after Peter sat down. Then he addressed Miss Davis. "Miss Davis, after hearing all the testimonies, do you still maintain your position against this adoption?" Miss Davis stood up, but her expression had changed. Peter's testimony had clearly affected her. "Your Honor," she said slowly, maybe, I've been too rigid in my interpretation of the regulations." "How so?" "Hearing today about the whole story, about what Lily's mother did for the Manning family, about the genuine bond between the children." She paused. "I think the best interest of the minor would really be to stay with the family that clearly loves her and that she loves." A murmur of surprise echoed through the room. No one expected Miss Davis to change her position. The judge banged his gavel to restore order. "Very well, I will retire to deliberate. The decision will be announced in 1 hour." While they waited in the hallway, Lily could barely breathe with anxiety. Peter held one of her hands, and Isabella held the other, with Henry sleeping peacefully in her lap. "Regardless of what happens," said Theodore, "I want you to know that you will always be our daughter in our hearts." "What if the judge says no?" "Then we'll appeal," replied Isabella firmly, "and if that doesn't work, we'll keep fighting until we find a way to stay together." When they were called back into the room, Lily's heart was beating so hard that she was sure everyone could hear it. The judge sat down and looked at all those present. "I have reached a decision." The silence in the courtroom was so profound that the sound of the ceiling fan seemed like a roar. Lily held her breath, her fingers intertwined with those of Peter and Isabella, forming a chain of support and hope. The judge, Dr. Harrison, adjusted his glasses and looked directly at before speaking. During my 20 years deciding family cases, I have rarely come across a situation so complex and yet so clear. He paused, consulting his notes. We have here a child who has demonstrated exceptional courage, a family that has demonstrated genuine love, and irrefutable evidence that the well-being of both parties depends on remaining together. Lily felt her heart race even faster. Could it be possible, considering all the testimonies, medical and psychological evidence, and especially the best interest of the minor Lily Johnson, I grant the request for definitive guardianship to the Manning family. For a moment no one moved. The words seemed to echo in the air, as if they weren't real. Then gradually understanding took over everyone. That means, began Lily, her voice just a whisper. It means, said the judge with a rare smile, that you are now officially Lily Johnson Manning, daughter of Theodore and Isabella Manning, sister of Henry Manning. The outburst of emotion that followed was indescribable. Isabella cried openly, hugging Lily, while Henry, who had woken up with the commotion, smiled as if he understood that something wonderful had happened. Theodore hugged the two, tears running down his face without any attempt to hide them. Peter jumped for joy, shouting, "We did it!" repeatedly until Dr. Morales gently asked him to lower his voice. Even Miss Davis was smiling, and when she approached Lily there were tears in her eyes too. "Lily," she said, "I apologize for having been so rigid. Sometimes we follow rules so blindly that we forget the human heart behind them." "It's okay, Miss Davis," replied Lily, surprising everyone with her generosity. "You were trying to protect all the children. That's important too." The judge banged his gavel one last time. "The process is officially complete. Manning family, I wish you all the happiness in the world." When they left the courthouse, Galveston seemed like a completely different city to Lily. The same streets where she had been hungry and cold were now the streets where she had a family waiting for her. The same Galveston Bay that had witnessed so much suffering now reflected the sunlight like a mirror of hope. "And now," asked Lily to Theodore as they walked to the car. "Now we're going home," he replied. "Our home, your home." And Peter, Theodore, looked at the boy who had become so important in Lily's life. "Peter, would you like to have dinner with us today to celebrate?" "Can I really?" asked Peter, his eyes shining. "Of course, friends of the family are always welcome." That afternoon, the Manning house was full of life and joy in a way it had never been before. Lily helped Isabella prepare the celebration dinner, while Theodore played with Henry in the garden. Peter explored the house with admiration, impressed by the size and comfort. "Lily," said Isabella, while they were cutting vegetables in the kitchen, "there's something we want to show you." "What is it?" "Come with me." Isabella led Lily to the second floor of the house, stopping in front of a door that had always remained closed during her visits. "This is going to be your room," said Isabella. Opening the door, Lily entered and was speechless. The room had been completely decorated for her. The walls were painted light blue, her favorite color, with delicate drawings of birds flying freely, a clear reference to her first words about wanting to fly like the birds. There was a real bed with soft sheets, a desk for studying, bookshelves full of books, and a large window overlooking the garden. "When did you do this?" asked Lily, carefully touching the furniture as if it were made of crystal. "Theodore started preparing this room the day after the incident in the sewer," replied Isabella. "Even without knowing if we would be able to adopt you, he said it was important to be prepared. Because he was sure that you were my family from the first day, because he was sure that we were going to fight for you, no matter how long it took." That night, during the celebration dinner, Theodore made a special toast. "To Lily," he said, raising his glass of orange juice, "who taught us that family isn't about blood or conventions, but about love, protection, and choice. To Carol," added Isabella, "who gave us twice the gift of life and who raised an extraordinary daughter. And to Peter," said Lily, looking at her best friend, "who has always been by my side, even when things seemed impossible. And to Henry," said Peter, making everyone laugh, "who was the most important baby in the world for bringing you all together." Henry, as if understanding that he was being honored, clapped his hands and made his characteristic happy sounds. 3 months later, life at the Manning house had found its natural rhythm. Lily attended the local school, where she quickly became one of the favorite students due to her maturity and natural kindness. Henry, now 8 months old, had developed a cheerful and confident personality, always looking for his big sister. Peter had become practically a member of the family, having dinner with them at least 3 times a week and spending weekends, playing with Henry and helping Lily with her homework. Theodore had begun discreet conversations with Ms. Davis about the possibility of adopting Peter too, when the time was right. "Lily," said Theodore one Saturday afternoon while they watched Henry crawl through the garden under the watchful supervision of his sister, "there's something I want to tell you." "What is it, Dad?" Lily had started calling him Dad naturally, without anyone asking or teaching her. "Remember when you asked about your mother having worked here?" "I remember. I discovered something else about that period." Theodore sat down next to Lily on the garden bench. "When your mother saved Isabella and Henry that night, she did more than simply call for help." "What else did she do?" "She remained at the hospital all night, donated blood when she found out she was the same blood type as Isabella, and only left when the doctors assured her that both of you would be okay." Lily felt tears of pride welling up in her eyes. "Mom always took care of everyone. There's something else. The doctor said that if she hadn't acted so quickly, both Isabella and Henry would have died. She literally saved 2 lives that night. And then I saved Henry's life when he was in danger." "Exactly. It's as if you and your mother are guardian angels of this family." Lily thought about it for a moment. "Dad, do you think Mom knew this was going to happen?" "What do you mean?" "That one day I was going to need to take care of the baby she helped to be born." Theodore looked at his adopted daughter, impressed once again by her precocious wisdom. "I don't know, honey, but I know she would be very proud to see the brave woman you are becoming." At that moment, Henry crawled to them and tried to stand up, holding onto Lily's leg. She immediately bent down to help him, talking to him in a special language that only the 2 of them understood. "You know something," said Theodore, observing the interaction between the siblings. "What?" "I think your mom did know, and I think she sent you to save Henry because she knew that, by doing, that you would also save yourself." "How so?" "You spent 2 years suffering alone, without family, without a home, without hope. But when you saved Henry, you found your real family, you found your home, you found your purpose." Lily looked around the garden where she played every day, at the house that was now hers, at the brother she loved more than anything in the world, and understood that Theodore was right. "Dad," she said, "can I ask you a question?" "Of course. If we could go back in time and prevent David from putting Henry in the sewer, would you do that?" Theodore thought carefully before answering. "It's a difficult question. Of course I wouldn't want Henry to go through that danger, nor you to go through so much fear. But if that hadn't happened, maybe we would have never discovered that you existed. Maybe you would still be living on the streets, and we would still be an incomplete family without knowing it. So sometimes bad things happen so that good things can happen later. Sometimes, yes, and sometimes very special girls turn bad things into miracles." That night, when Lily lay in her soft bed in the room that had been decorated especially for her, she looked out the window at the stars over Galveston. Somewhere up there, she knew that her mother was proud. She had started this journey as a street girl, looking for cans to sell. Now she was a beloved daughter, a protective sister, and living proof that love can overcome any obstacle. Henry was sleeping peacefully in the room next door, protected and happy. Peter was safe at the accommodation, but knowing that he had a family who cared about him, Theodore and Isabella had found a daughter who completed their lives in ways they never imagined possible. And Lily had finally found her place in the world, not as the girl who saved a baby, but as the girl who discovered that saving someone is, sometimes, the best way to save yourself too. As she fell asleep on her first official night as Lily Johnson, Manning, her last thought was a silent promise to her mother. She would continue taking care of Henry, she would continue being brave, and she would continue believing that love always finds a way. In the yellow house on the shores of Galveston Bay, a family slept in peace, knowing that they had found each other against all odds, and that nothing and no one could separate them again. The circle had been completed. The girl who once lived on the streets now had a home. The baby who almost got lost now had a sister to protect him. And a family that didn't know it was incomplete was now whole. And so, in the small city of Galveston, in the heart of Texas, another story of love and redemption became part of the eternal memory of a place where miracles still happen, for those who believe in the transformative power of human compassion.